Before we get into the internal structures and vessels of the heart, we want to orient ourselves with the outside structures. What we are showing now is the base of the heart. At the bottom, where we see a sharp point, is the apex of the heart. Along this line, we see the coronary artery, which supplies blood to the heart itself. To look at the internal structures of the heart, we are going to have to make a coronal cut to separate the anterior and posterior halves. Here we see the chambers, muscles, chordae tendineae, and other beautiful structures of the heart. These are muscles that surround the most obvious chamber of the heart, the left ventricle. It is surrounded with the thickest and strongest muscles necessary to pump blood to the whole body. What I am pulling here are the chordae tendineae, which connect to the bicuspid valve here and the papillary muscles here. The papillary muscles contract to open the valve above. Just a reminder, since we opened the heart like a book, this section here is also the left atrium and left ventricle. Over here is the right ventricle. Here we move the heart to help orient ourselves and show that the right half of the heart on the table here is what you would typically see in a diagram of the heart. What I am showing now is the right atrium, which is connected to the right ventricle via the tricuspid valve. Another interesting note is that above the right ventricle, in the right atrium, is a structure called the auricle, which looks like an ear and increases the volume of the right atrium. Now we're going to look at the vessels of the heart. The first vessel with thin walls is the vena cava, which supplies blood to the right atrium. There is another entry point for deoxygenated blood into the vena cava shown here. Again, it leads to the right atrium, which sends blood through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The next vessel we want to highlight comes out of the right ventricle and sends blood to the lungs. This is the pulmonary artery. I'm going to be showing that this artery is continuous with the right ventricle here. The pulmonary artery brings blood to the lungs and is the only artery to hold deoxygenated blood. The left ventricle sends blood out of the aorta to the rest of the body. The semilunar valve here is between the left ventricle and the aorta. Now let's put everything together. The vena cava, shown here, brings deoxygenated blood to the right atrium. This whole structure here is part of the vena cava. Since we opened the heart like a book, the right atrium is also here. The right atrium sends blood through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle has some muscle that is powerful enough to send blood through the pulmonary artery, the only artery that has deoxygenated blood, and sends this blood to the lungs. After oxygenation, blood returns through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. The left atrium sends blood to the left ventricle, which powerfully pumps blood using the thickest muscles of the heart through the aorta to the rest of the body. The aorta branches off a couple of times here to supply blood evenly throughout the body. Another note before we end, the small holes that are shown here are the coronary arteries, which supply nutrients and oxygen to the heart itself. Thank you, and here are the credits.